So was really happy to have somebody of his caliber be willing to do the first show here. And he was very excited about it, and I was really excited to get him to do it. Okay, so with that, I'm turning it over to him.
Thank you, Porter. It was sort of amazing. I would have never thought of this, and Bonnie too, for putting the show up at, this is the Art Barn Annex, and this is the first Art Barn Yarn. So sit back and just relax, and I'm open to any questions. I've always been questionable, so. Well, I thought I'd start with, I was born in Juneau, Alaska. There was 2,500 people living there then. And the Red Dog Saloon was very active there. I've got all sorts of stories, but we can't get into that now. And Red Dog Saloon is still there. 25,000 people is the population now. It's never had a major fire. The whole city still has boardwalks. And I was born in this building right there, which now is a nursing home. Ready for you.
Thank you for this.
Full circle. There's my dad. He was had been there all through the 30s, and my mom, I just finished a book on a Hinckley fire, was living in Hinckley, Minnesota, and she and her girlfriend kept looking at Juneau. It's warmer all the time. You know, it's warmed by the Japanese current. And it just happens to have rain 315 days a year, but it's usually not too heavy. And the prices were, they didn't know about the prices, but they knew the salaries for teachers were much higher. So they got on a train, went down to Vancouver and came up by boat, and my dad, who'd been there, said they waited for every new boat to look for the talent that was coming down. And,
just like at Spring Island.
and they were married in 38, and but I didn't know, I'd always been told that I'd never met my grandfather, but then this was one of the pictures that showed up, and that's L.G. Magellan Kaiser, who's my grandfather. He ran the weather operation at the building of the Panama Canal. So my dad was born in Ancon, Panama in 1909. And then the Japs attacked Pearl Harbor, and we were all evacuated in 1942 in January. The ships had to zigzag down the coast because the Japs had the I-class submarines, which had, you know, pontoon planes that could be brought out, wings put on, and they actually bombed our west coast. But this is kept from all the American public. So we moved to Arlington, Virginia, which is where I grew up. That was the fastest growing part of the United States at the time. The Pentagon was being built. And we had dirt roads on Edison Street. And my mom, being a teacher, didn't like the school system. So from when I was in first grade, when I was 6, she would take me down to bottom Edison Street to Route 50 and put me on a bus. And by myself, I'd go across into Roslyn and across the Key Bridge and up to Hyde School, which is on O Street near Wisconsin Avenue. She picked me up at 3 in the afternoon. So all those years I'd go in on myself, and that's where I learned how much I love the absurd. Because I'd be sitting on the bus and, oh, hi, what are you doing, little boy? He said, I'm going to Hyde School. And they'd faint, you know, to get up and say, you go to high school? It happened over and over. So actually, my first girlfriend was Hannah Jensen, was a Danish diplomat's daughter. You know, so the school it was at was a very interesting place in Georgetown to growing up in. And I remember my mom would take me to plays. I saw Gloria Penza's father singing in South Pacific as a kid on the because it would play in DC before it went to Broadway. You know, and Mary Martin and Peter Pan was a really cool place. And then Mom would also take me down to the Portrait Gallery, National Gallery, and I didn't realize it had just been opened in '47 or something like that. You know, and that was so boring to see all these paintings and everything. So, growing up there, somehow I got a passion for the violin in the 5th grade, and I worked and worked and worked on that. I think the longest I ever spent practicing for one day was 10 hours. You know, so you see yourself building some sort of a mental something. You know, you don't know why, except I figured out later it was a way to not have to deal with my family. stay upstairs and practice. We had a band from mostly Princeton guys, and we went down to play it in Bermuda. And the drummer, I'm on the bass, the drummer, Phil Weinstein, went on to become the neurosurgeon and president of Cushing Society. And John Simon, who is the piano player, is the one that was produced and recorded Blood, Sweat and Tears, the Pink album, Janis Joplin and Michael Franks, things like that, you know. And we actually, the 3 of us ended up playing at our 50th reunion.
Wow.
So we've stayed in touch through the years.
Was that in Bermuda?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, that was, you'd fly out of Kennedy in Pan Am, and the time that we went there, they just took my bass and put it in first class with me. And I found out that the week before, a symphony orchestra member had put his bass on the conveyor belt, and it had gone around the corner and cracked it in half, and the guy had a heart attack. And they said, we'll take care of your bass. So anyway, let's see, where are we? So at Princeton, I was in the Triangle Club. Actually, it was the conductor and musical director the last year. And you end up trying to get into medical school. There were 220 out of about 700 pre-meds at Princeton. And a lot of competition, I would guess. And by the January of senior year, I hadn't heard about any medical school, so I figured, well, I'll go up and talk to Dean Pereira, who had interviewed me there back in the fall. Interestingly, in those days, there were 120 in our class, and 100 were white males. And they always took 15 each from Princeton, Harvard, and Yale. So 45 of the guys at Columbia's med school class were all from there. And I hadn't heard in January, so I thought, well, I'll go up and talk to Dean Pereira again. He was the dean that had interviewed me. That morning, I had been up all night, and I was dressed in jeans, worse than this. And he looked and looked at me. I remember, I couldn't forget, he just kept looking at my stuff, my chart and stuff, and finally said, what are you going to do when you don't get into medical school? And I said, I'm going to be a frogman. Because, I really was into that sort of thing, And, but it didn't help that much. In January, I thought, well, I'll go talk to him again. So I went up, and riding the train back, I thought, who knows me better than anybody here at Princeton but Milt Lyon, who was the professional director of the Triangle Club. So I went over to Milt, and I said, have you ever heard of a recommendation from med school? He says, sure, you want one? I said, sure. 2 weeks later, I had a telegram putting me in the class. Wow. This is sort of shows you can have some effect on your future. If you take, you do something with it. So got into med school, and I always felt like I was born under a lucky star. So here was Annie was in the class of 65, and I were in the class of 65. She in nursing school, me in med school, and that's where we met, So that was the beginning of the, July 1st of '65 is when you start your internship and stuff. And that's also the day that Medicare started. And so I went to Roosevelt, which is a wonderful cutting hospital, with a lot of surgery, in the middle of Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan. And after Vietnam is in '65, Vietnam's heating up, the draft comes, and it comes on the Berry Plan. The Berry Plan would let you go in, you had to go into the military from medical school. You could go in after internship, or after 1 year of residency, or after finishing your training. So of course I wanted to be a hand surgeon. I already knew that from working in the anatomy lab on the hand, because I got a 1 year deferment into the Navy. So, well, my dad had been on a carrier for 2.5 years in Kamikaze, and they survived that and all. And I grew up with all these sea stories from the Westpac. So I thought, and living in Arlington, I said, well, I'll go down to BuMed and find out where he's going to billet me. I took a train down, or hitchhiked sometimes, and went into the captain, and he said, well, we're sending 95% of our guys into in-country, in Vietnam. So I said, that'd be fine. So, no, I said, you got to be part of the program. You don't have much choice. Then as I was leaving, I had the door open, and I turned around and I said, Captain, whatever his name was, my dad was in the Second World War, and I grew up with all these sea stories. I wouldn't mind being on a carrier. 2 weeks later, I was billeted to a carrier. So you're working in plastic surgery now, and you're a big part of it. I had a dark room when I was a kid. I've always liked photography. And of course in plastic surgery, you're doing photos on all the patients, all the time. But then I wanted to do some volunteer work, so I did about 26 trips to Latin and America and Asia. And I thought I'd put in the opposite of a plug for China here. We should unplug China. We were in Shanghai at one point here in '93. This is what Shanghai looked like then. They were just beginning this, almost finishing this huge tower here. But the board and everything else was totally very unchanged. Then to give you an idea of how fast China changes. What you go from no place to this 10 years later. Now that building on the far right is the second tallest building in the world. It's finished, and it's only half. There was an article in the Times about it's only half full. Not everything China is doing is working great for them. We call it Eat Street, where everybody sat and they cooked all like that. And they had this open, all the ducks there are alive. If you want a duck, you come and take it. And this is where the COVID thing, they're wondering about where it came from. So it's still very much like that in large parts of China. And we went up to Urumqi. Urumqi is now where the Chinese have over 1 million in the concentration camps, all the Uyghurs. We worked with the Uyghurs, the surgeons there. He had us over, or had me over for dinner. His wife fixed a wonderful dinner, and I said to him, it seems like you're getting treated here worse, like the Chinese treat Tibetans. He said, worse and much longer. Setup was pretty primitive in wherever we went. Here I was working with this kind of equipment. This reminded me of where I was born, because the Eskimos hunt for seals by making a hole in the ice and then put a feather there, and if the seal comes up to breathe, they can see the feather going, and they just stab them like that. That's the way the Eskimos do. Well, they made sure that I was breathing by the feather on there. Watching, So some of the cases you see are unbelievable. I mean, you did whatever came your way, basically, mostly cleft lips and palates were one of them. Here was a guy with elephantiasis. This is what you could do when we were trying to leave from China. They wouldn't let us out because they said you came with 28 boxes and you only have 14. And we said, it's all disposable. I mean, everything is thrown out. They couldn't understand. Finally, we get out, but then we find out they sued the hospital, the Uyghur hospital, for accepting illegal stuff. And that's the way. Well, this is '93, 1,000 times more worse now. But so just take out your pen if you want to read some good stuff about what's going on in China and North Korea, which this Barbara Demick has 2 books. I read Nothing to Envy quite a few years ago. She made 7 sneaks into North Korea. She's an unbelievable writer. And the one that just came out now, Eat the Buddha, is life and death in a Tibetan town. And it's also tells the whole history of how the Chinese come in and ruin places. And if you like that kind of thing, they're really. We had a place in Vermont, and when I retired in 2005, my partner who knows all this stuff, he said, Apple has a new thing called Final Cut Pro. You can make your own videos. So I thought, well, I'll start. So this is one of the first ones that I did, and segues into this sort of, this is just a little part of it. But I always liked interviewing people at work.
Well, the trees came down in February and got over to the sawmill in the first couple weeks of February. And then Pete and I started coming out about the last few days of February over in Midland. We started with the very first bed we can see from the road, A. And we've been cutting out pretty much non-stop ever since. We had a few days off here and there, but it's been pretty straight out.
That's our son John playing there. So from that, I got interested in this is the rolling barn that was being built. And once it was finished, I thought, you got these cameras, because I can hardly lift this now. And so we started doing this is one of my first panoramas like that. Annie and I always loved pictures that are long this way.
Yeah.
So there's the rolling barn.
That's beautiful.
It's a wonderful place. It's at Hildene, which was built by Robert Todd Lincoln, Lincoln's only child to make it into adulthood.
Ended up president of the Pullman Company in a time when it went between wooden cars to metal cars, and he was ambassador to London. So Robert Todd has a good book about him. So here's at Spring Island, another one of these men at work things. Again, just the beginning. The feller puncher weighs about 3 tons and has a very heavy flywheel saw.
You tipped it over? Oh yeah, I've turned it over about 3 times.
Turn it on.
You can't help it.
This is sped out. This is on the 4th hole when they're cleaning out all these sick trees. And I sped it up 2 times. So it doesn't work that fast, but it works just as efficient. This is so how easy it is to take a forest now. And then this is the skidder, the skid trails. Now I started using the drone. And that's again double speed. But they really move along, and then, you know, each tree is a ton or more, you know, amazing.
When did you first start using the drone?
Well, I looked that up. My first flight was 2 days after our 56th anniversary. No, 46th anniversary. 46, in 7 years ago. So from then on, through many disasters and so forth, you keep. So I started using it more around Spring Island, and this is actually, I did it once with the old drone, and this is a 4K drone.
Left center of the fairway is a good play here to a slightly elevated green. There is a false front, and you want to add a half club to a club to be able to get to the center of the green.
So Poteet is the guy that wrote, he's a local, he's a real southern guy. Got permission to use
The
these.
second hole, the tee ball is a risk reward. If you aim to the right side of the bunker, you will have a short club in, but to be safe, you want to aim to the center or left side of the fairway bunker. If you feel like you can't reach the green, there's plenty of room left.
So you're working around with your drone, and I've done the panoramas that you saw, and then one day I thought, maybe if I just use that as a panorama, I'll just take pictures, turn the drone, because the camera doesn't turn, the drone turns. Let me show you. The drone is so, 7 years ago, was about when the first one of these from DJI came out. They've been around, but I was watching, interested in Amazon. One of them had a camera that was attached. So the first one I got you just buy the whole thing. And they kept getting more and more sophisticated. These rotors do about 14,000 revs, RPM. They're amazingly fast. And of course, they go in opposite directions, so that it's stabilized. And it's all radio controlled. Now, initially I only get about 6 satellites, but now they actually hover in place connected to up to 17 satellites. So wherever you stop, it just sits there. And the batteries are amazing. Now they limit how far you can go. I used to go from here way out to Route 170 and stuff. But if you're out there and the battery knows it has only so much, it has to get back a certain amount, it will automatically come back. You know, it tells you got to come back. And of course, anytime you want to get it back, you just hit return to home, and it comes right back. You know, it's amazing technology. It's all those photos. I'm not sure if it's true, but I know that the Army years ago said if you are in the Army, anywhere, American Army, you're not allowed to use DJI equipment because of the question of the stuff going directly back to China with all the information, which is certainly something that I think I wouldn't be surprised to have. DJI is a Chinese, or it's the #1 drone making company. But these, now I got FAA, for getting your FAA license, you need to study up like a pilot, and you get that, and then you can do what you want. So I started taking some photos. I thought, coming back from Beaufort once, the tide was way in, the light was bright. I said, well, why don't I just stop on the side of the road and see if I can do a panorama. So this was the the first one I did. This is, these things still astonish me. You know, because of it's a 20 megabyte camera. It's a good camera. But this is into the Broadway River Bridge, all the way up to Port Royal Sound Foundation. It's 4 miles. And with the do it at the high tide, you can see, Beaufort County is 65% underwater at high tide. Nobody knows that better than Earl. So that was the first one. It was one of those. I gave one of those for Bailey. Land Trust. And then we got to the framing part. Annie's got to be good friends. This is one of Mary Seeger's early photo paintings, and I saw she was doing this, and so I called her up. I said, "Where do you get the wood and stuff?" She said, "Let me think. Graco." So I started going over there and getting the lath, and the toughest things is to do the 45-degree angle. So you leave the line, and you can just. And that's once you got one of those, it's easy. This is another tangent. If we ever get through the tangents, this yarn will end. I'll tell you, Beryl Lamont gave me that bandsaw. They don't make it that size anymore, but she made dollhouse stuff and everything. She bought it herself, but when she and Peter left, she gave me that. And that brings up Peter Lamont, because I trained with him in New York. So I remember when he first came back, he said, he was orthopedic. He said, "I'm going to build a hospital down in Hilton Head." That was our connection, one of the connections to coming down to Spring Island. That's amazing. Yeah, small world. Yeah. So then you have to learn how to stretch your canvas, and Jack Crawford was the first guy who told me about doing canvas work. So we did started doing that, and I got asking Jack, "Do you have any?" He gave me some old stuff because he quit doing it, and we started working on that. And I found out about Stretcher Bar Warehouse, and that's this. These are cut with. They're out in Los Osos, California, halfway between LA and San Francisco on the coast, and there's 6 or 7 lasers cut the wood.
Wow.
So and then you just fit them together, and you got a frame. They're really cool, and they come in all different sizes. They used to be able to get 4-inch. Now they don't even make 6-inch. 7 is the lowest you can go. I think they were having problems with the machines and stuff. So then you stretch the canvas with one of these and staple it, and you got it.
Do you use that for what they call G-plate canvases, where you take a photograph and then put it onto a canvas and then
I use Epson. There's other printers too, but they just print it on the canvas and then stretch it. So my printer is 13 inches wide, so 11 is the widest I can go, because you have to have enough to bring around the wood. So some of the photos here, there's a favorite of mine. That one, the lower left one, is 360. That, I think, is 12 photographs done with the software, and it's a few. I think it's maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Lightroom did a thing where you could do merge and you could put several pictures in a row. But it won't do more than 4 or 5. So you for 19 bucks, you get PMX or whatever it's called, and you can put them all in a row. So that's 360 degrees with, you see Kalawasi Causeway there, and then a little bridge.
Oh, okay.
And then over to the Colleton River and over. The one above it is Lost Pond. Does anybody know where that is? This is another strange part of the history of Spring Island. I asked Betsy Chafin, where is that place there called? You know, because it's not on any map. And she said, well, let's call it Lost Pond. Because on the right is the Chafin Dock, and Jim Light's place now, the Carroll's Dock, is the other side. They put that together like a shrimp pond, so they had their own dock, their own pond. And as a DHEC or whatever the government agency is, they said you can't have two of those on Spring Island, and so they made them ruin the dike there. And see in the center?
Yeah.
Of course, it looks much bigger it is because of the distortion of the thing, but that's that. So Betsy's calls that Lost Pond. The top one up there is off of her dock. One particular, we were sitting over there having drinks with the mayors, and I was looking the other way, and Ann said, "Turn around, look at that." And of course, you know, these old Canon 7, this is a marvelous Canon, you know, with your light, they are just totally passe now. You turn around, they're not. You got to be like David Ruska. You use these kind of cameras for great photographs. But just having this kind of stuff and fishing poles and stuff doesn't make you a photographer or a fisher. But you all got them anyway. So that's their dock with a panorama function on the iPhone. And then Jim Bizarro's and our whole farm there, Waterfall Farm. This was the gazebo here, with you can see very clearly the pecan forest or orchard there. The south shore of and in the Lost Pond is way up at the end, past the Carrolls, you see there, the whole south shore.
You just don't see that from the ground, do you?
No, it's so amazing. Here's just a panorama from the camera of the causeway.
Ah,
This one, we're out at our builder, who's become like a family member, John Clements, has a fish camp out there on Cow Island, which is right across from the Ladies Island airport. And this is 500-foot dock. And we went out there for some drinking. And when we came in on Saturday, the high tide, we got off the boat and got off here. Then when we went out Sunday, the wind was blowing so strongly this way that the tide couldn't come in. It's the first time I've seen that. The water didn't come back in. So we had to put on boots and walk out to the boat and push that into the thing on Sunday morning. That's Matthew's dock. Here's another panel of this, and then these are other drone panoramas. You can Walker Landing, and then one of my favorites is the 18th hole. That's Therio and Dick Childs fishing there. That's just a drone photo. And that's just a regular iPhone photo from this there, and then you see. So anyway, basically that's what you can do with a
With stuff.
yeah. This stuff, yeah. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
that's spectacular, the sky on that. I mean,
Yeah, I know, it's just,
it's just the
Did you
perfect
fool around with
moment.
that?
well, the whole thing is, what's the best camera? It's the one you pick out of your pocket.
The one you have with
Because you gotta be there.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll show you.
did you wait
some-
for it, or?
Another, this is, now you're starting to get into my strangeness. These are aleatoric. This is the way things get screwed up if they're moving while you're doing the panorama. And to make it more aleatoric, I have two recorded percussion things running one backwards and one forwards underneath each other. But there's the caboose. There's our son-in-law with a you know, strange vehicles.
Look at these poor people.
There are some people not moving. Thanks for listening. Will disappear.
That was all in China? Or in Japan?
Japan.
Japan, yeah.
JJ, you're controlling, when it's up in here, you're controlling everything from your iPhone on there.
Oh, yeah, I didn't,
So,
right, a lot of, I'm used to, you just put this in there, and then you hook this into the iPhone,
yeah,
and so everything is
so
right
you're
there.
watching that
So you've got
screen.
Ranker who's looking for fish and everything, they use iPads, it's much easier, it's a much bigger thing to look at. You know, but I got so used to this, and, it just, the thing is, you can't, the sun, you can't see anything.
Right.
You know, things like that. And then, of course, doing these photos like this, you have to know the tides, go out at high tide if you want, or low tide like that one, by Abby. To me, with all the tidal creeks, the low and the high almost look the same. They look almost the same from above, if you don't get worried about the colors, but they're just as beautiful.
Thank you.
Amazing. Such dedication.
It's not dedication, it's just fun. Like you say, I'm the lucky star. If you love what you're doing,
Yeah,
you never work a day in your life.
That's right.
It's been that way, you know?
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Thank you all.
Thank you.